Okay, so let's look at the internal structures of the brain. So with the internal structures, we organize it with the white matter on the inside and the gray matter on the outside. Now the white matter are where myelinated axons are in the central nervous system. The gray matter is where those cell bodies are. So one place that's really easy to see it on this brain model, so it's true in the cerebrum, it's also true back here in the cerebellum. So our white matter in the cerebellum is organized on the inside, and in fact, its organization is so intricate that we call it the arbor vitae, which means tree of life. And you can see that it's surrounded on the outside by gray matter. Now, as we make our mid-sagittal cut through the longitudinal fissure, the first structure that we cut through is known as the corpus callosum. Now, this is going to tether both sides of the brain together so that we can integrate. Inferior to that, you see a second axonal tract, which is smaller but arches just inferior to the corpus callosum, and this is called the fornix. Between the corpus callosum and the fornix is a little small window-like partition called the septum pellucidum. Septum means wall and pellucidum means clear window. Now in the models, it looks really hard and thick, but you'll see in the dissection video that the septum pellucidum is just a really thin little membrane. And tucked behind there, if we poke through this, we end up in the lateral ventricle. So let's go back to our fornix and work our way inferior. So as we work our way down, the next structure we see, and we can see it on both hemispheres here, because we have a left and a right thalamus. And they are connected to each other by a little band of tissue called the intermediate mass. Inferior to the thalamus is a little funnel-shaped region called the hypothalamus, hypo meaning below. And it is going to be tethered to a stalk-like projection called the infundibulum that would connect, although it's missing on this model, to the pituitary gland. And remember, that's going to sit in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Now, if we come back to our thalamus on each side, we'll see that one side of this model has a blue-like structure. Now, they do that for simplicity's sake, but you can assume that it would be on both sides in life. Now, what this blue-like structure is called the choroid plexus. And this contains tiny blood vessels, basically a capillary bed, and also a collection of cells called ependymal cells, which produce CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. And so what we see here is as we make this mid-sagittal cut, we cut through what's known as the third ventricle. And a choroid plexus will line all of the ventricles and produce CSF. Now, also on this model, if we look inferior to the choroid plexus, or just here on this side, there's a pink line here that leads to a little pink bump. This is known as the pineal gland, and that produces melatonin, which helps to regulate our sleep and wake cycles. Lastly, as we look, if we look at our hypothalamus here, just posterior to it, we have a white bump. This is known as the mammillary body. Now, as we work our way down, we start to see our brain stem and structures associated with that. So our brain stem is broken into three parts: the proximal midbrain, the pons is in the middle and has an anterior facing bump, and then it continues on as the medulla oblongata until we pass through the foramen magnum, where it will become the spinal cord. So again, on this side, midbrain, pons has the anterior facing bump, medulla oblongata, and then at the foramen magnum, we become spinal cord. Now the midbrain does have some features to be aware of. It has a set of 4 bumps, 2 on each hemisphere, collectively being 4. We call these bumps the corpora quadrigemina. So that means 4 twins. And these are responsible for your visual and auditory reflexes. Also within the midbrain, you have your cerebral aqueduct, which is running from your 3rd ventricle, here between the thalami, and the 4th ventricle, which sits just posterior to the pons, between it and the cerebellum. So this triangular region here is the 4th ventricle. Cerebral aqueduct connecting the two.